Everybody, Mike McWilliams upstairs for the right music. It's been a while since I've just sat down and just had a conversation about things. I've been packing and unpacking and things and unboxing things and demoing things, and it kind of is cool. Of course, certainly for YouTube, you get a lot of views on shows like that, but it's these simple talks that I like to do with you guys, if you indulge me to do so with you. That really is what this channel is about. It's talking about practical things. And today, I'd like to talk about how you're living in the golden age of recording direct. And what do I mean by that? Well, I started working on a new album. And so there are a lot of various ways that I'm going about recording this particular album that I didn't do before. On a lot of the recordings that I've done for commercials and my own albums and other artists, I've been using a lot of software-based plugins for, amp effects and things like that. Up until the very last album that I worked on, the Asanoki album. And I really was able to hear a difference with the Asanoki stuff, that half of it was in the box and the other half of it, some of the songs I recorded miking up this Laney behind me. And also some of them I began to use amps in a box. I used the Joyo American sound on some of those tracks. And I was listening to my older albums and I was thinking to myself, well, this is really something. This is interesting because I can hear that sonic difference, and I prefer the non-in-the-box sound. And so that's where I started with the premise of today's show, talking about that you live in the golden age of recording direct. See, even when I started out in the 1980s in 16-track, right-track recording studio in LA, recording stuff, we didn't have the option of doing any of that thing. If you wanted to record your guitar or your bass, you had two options: to amp up and to mic that amp, or to record directly into the console. Recording directly into the console in this manner is something that's been going on, since the beginning of recording in the recording studio. Honestly, I can think of two examples that come off the top of my head is Jimmy Page and rock and roll. Andy Johns was the engineer on that. And he and Jimmy, an excellent producer, as you know, decided to go directly with Jimmy's Telecaster into the board, and then to parallel two compressors. One, they took the compression off, and then turned the output way up, and that fed into another compressor. And that is the basis of that distorted guitar sound that you hear on that. It's actually not an amp sound, it's actually two compressors, one driving the other one and then compressing that sound. And then they recorded that track 3 times over to double it, to make it, thicken it up and make it sound louder. And certainly to this day you can't argue that the guitar tone in rock and roll is an excellent tone. That's recording direct. No amps, no pedals, no nothing involved. But it's a little tricky, and I do believe that Andy Johns himself said that unless you use those particular compressors that he used, then it's not going to work. It has to be those, and so you see that recording direct had its limitations. You could do a lot of post-processing things with it, but not a lot. And also with a 4-track system, you were bouncing a lot. So once you committed to something to tape, that was it. So the other example that I can think of is with Chic and Nile Rodgers in his famous The Hitmaker Strat. He plugged directly into the console to record the Chic Le Freak or Freak Out, one of those Chic songs. I'm not putting it down because it's funky stuff, but after a while it all sounded the same to me. But there's no doubting that Nile Rodgers' sound on that particular record, The Freak, Freak Out. That song was recorded directly into the board. Also, they mic'd a Fender Tweed as well. So you had a mic'd amp and you had the direct sound that they combined together to make that tone. So this is still a lot to go through in order to achieve that sound that you're looking for without having the hassle of micing up an amp if you have an amp to mic up. And then that gets into microphones. You can get away with, as I've told you before, an SM57, that'll do you fine. If that's the only mic that you can afford, then that's what I've used, and it's worked out just fine for me. But that does incur a cost as well. And once you buy that amp, you're locked into whatever that amp sound is. If you're Jimmy Page, then you can go out and buy whatever, 1x12 amps you want, to fill up a room, and, you can choose the sound. But when you buy an amp like this Laney, which I love, is my favorite amp, it's my amp of amps, but still it's a Marshall tone. I'm not going to get any Fender tones out of this thing. So if I want to get a Fender tone, then that means I got to buy a Fender amp. Do you understand where I'm going with this? This was the conditions that I grew up in recording studios up until, I'd say, the early 2000s. When stuff like this started coming out. And this is why I say you now live in the golden age of recording direct. This is a Sedano amp in a box. This is made by MT. This is their S1 Legend amps. This is a Sedano amp completely with the FET works, everything with this that you would expect in a Sedano amp is in this pedal form. Can you imagine if Jimmy Page had this and all he had to do is just go in here, and here it has the option of a clean out of just a signal, or it's got an amp simulator built into it, and it's powerful enough where this is all you need. You plug into here, go into your recorder, and you're rocking and rolling. You've got yourself a Sedano amp sound. You get tired of that sound, then you plug in your Marshall Bluesbreaker. You've got a Marshall sound. You plug in your American sound. You've got a Fender sound. You understand what I'm saying? Is that for the American sound is a $20 pedal. This one's a little bit more expensive. Actually, they don't make these anymore. You won't find this, but at the time it was a $120, $130 pedal. And as opposed to a 500 on up amp. You live in the golden age of recording direct. When you can go out and buy amps in a box like this AMT S1, like the Marshall Bluesbreaker, like the Joyo American sound, and one that I'm looking at right now is Supro pedal in a box, amp in a box. I'm really excited about that. That's going to be the next purchase that I make, I think, is that Supro, because I'm interested in that Supro sound, of course. One of my favorite guitars, actually my favorite living guitarist, and I don't say this very often, Brian Seltzer uses super amps, and I love the tone he gets out of that. Of course, everybody knows that the tone that Jimmy Page got out of his back in the day. So I'm interested in getting that amp, and the cost of that pedal, I believe I can get it for about $180 used, $225 new, and I have, a super amp that I don't have to lug around like I would if I bought the actual amp itself. I've got an amp pedal that accurately simulates the sound of the amp, and some say actually even better. So that's my point. So I guess what I'm saying with gear like these amps in a pedal form really taking off in the last 10 years, giving guitarists and bassists a lot of options in terms of recording directly into whatever medium that they're recording into, whether it's a hard disk or into actual real tape. I know some people that actually still do that. kind of admire that. I loaned my R8 Fostex machine out 20 years ago, and I still haven't seen it back yet. I wish I had that sometimes. But I digress as usual. Sorry about that. But I was saying to myself, this is just awesome. I frankly will never invest money in another amp again. This Laney right here behind me, that's my amp. That's the one that if I want to sit here and plug in and play out, that's the one I'm going to do. But I'm not going to invest any money into any more amps when I would rather take a fraction of that money and invest it in something like this, amp in a box. And I can have multiple amps. I can have literally the equivalent of a whole room full of amps just sitting on a shelf in pedal form. That as I record and as I produce, I can say, hey, this song could use a Dumble sound. This song could use a Fender sound. So I have the option of pulling from those with a better quality sounding device than in the box, in my opinion. I'm not thrilled with in the box distortion at all. It just doesn't work for me. And I'll be doing the amp in a box route because, again, like I said, you live in an era where you have so many options of amps. Now, some of them are great, some of them aren't. We talked about that in the past as well, about some of these amp simulators don't quite live up to it, but some of them do. Certainly, when you start spending more money and get into some of the JHS pedals and builders of that level, you're going to get, a pretty good approximation of what that pedal is trying to be. So you got a lot of options, is what I'm trying to say. You got far more options now than I did when I was a kid. And that also extends out into guitars, but we'll talk about that another time. So I guess today, the short subject that I'm talking about, the point that I'm trying to drive across to you is that if you just started recording now, you live in the golden age of recording. You have so many options and so many ways of doing it as opposed to how it used to be even just 20 years ago. So take that and run with it. I am not anti-amp, as you can see. Again, like I said, I've got this Laney behind me that I love dearly, and you have to take it from my cold, dead hands. I love it that much. I'll never sell it. But at the same time, I wouldn't invest any more money into any kind of amps because you can get pretty dang good dynamics out of these things, especially when they have the cab simulators built into it, or if you have a cab simulator on your pedal board that can emulate whatever output you're trying to get in terms of the cone. You can switch between Phono 60, or you can get yourself, a Greenback. You can go with, vintage 30, a vintage 60, whatever. So again, you have a lot of options that I didn't have growing up, and I'm like a kid in a candy store when it comes to these amps and a pedal. Like I said, I'm going to buy that Supro coming up here in a minute and see how that sounds. So just something for you to consider, for you to look at if you're starting out. I really don't think that it is necessary for you to spend a lot of money buying amps. As a matter of fact, if I was starting out playing guitar these days, I don't even think that I would buy the Laney. I would take that money that I invested in that, and I would go out and buy some of the best amp and a box pedals that are out there on the market, because those can, they can get pricey, but they're nowhere near as pricey as the cost of a 1x12 combo. So I would definitely go the amp in a box route. And if I were to hand out any advice to you, if you're starting out recording, I would do that as well. Because you have so many options, the cost is relatively fixed. It's not going to exceed, well, depending, if you run out and try to buy yourself a Klon, then you're on your own. But for something like this on the used market even, you're looking at $50, $60. So you're not locked into any kind of a deal as far as having to sell this if you decide you don't like it either. It's a lot easier to put this up on Reverb and try something else. So that's it for today. Just a little bit of a discussion about how lucky I think you guys are compared to when I was starting out. Just a fun discussion talking about you have so many options for recording now. It's staggering to me, and it's exciting as well. All right, we are getting very close to hitting 1,000 subscribers on this channel. If you haven't hit the like button on today's show, I would appreciate it if you have. And if you did like the contents of today's show, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And if you have subscribed with us, thank you so much for making our goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers just that much more closer. Each week we get closer and closer, and I can't do it without you. Until the next show, you guys take care. Bye-bye.